Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento. If you're anything like me, you're constantly wondering, how smart is AI? Well, we've all seen those benchmarks about how it can pass the SATs and what sort of score it gets on all these different exams like the bar exam. Well, today's entrepreneur and guest has built an AI engine in a smart large language model that outperforms the major AI models when it comes to this certified financial professional exam. And that's because today's guest and entrepreneur not only is building a very cool tech company, but he is on a mission to solve and alleviate the wealth gap. And he's doing it through financial education and AI. And it is such a powerful business that he's built. I'm personally so excited to learn from him and to hear his story. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is John Kanalakis. John is the founder and head of AI at Tendi, which is an AI-driven personal financial advisor platform. With a background in AI research and leadership roles at companies like Netflix and Roku, John leads Tendi's mission to bridge the financial literacy gap and combat wealth disparities by providing personalized financial guidance. Under his leadership, Tendi leverages advanced AI to offer users tailored insights into budgeting, debt reduction, savings growth, and investment strategies, empowering individuals to achieve financial well-being. And like I said, if you want to be impressed with him from a technology perspective, there's plenty there. If you want to be impressed with him from a missions-based perspective, there is so much there to love. But I think overall, you're really going to love the energy and the vision that John brings to the table and the pursuit that he's on through entrepreneurship, which I think is such a powerful channel and vehicle for him to enact this change. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with John Kanalakis. All right, John, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm great to be here and pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, super excited about to hear all about the things that you've been building, because you not only are building something incredible with Tendi and you have built it, but you have a really cool personal and professional story leading up to the launch of Tendi. So take us beyond the bio. Who's John? How did you start getting into all these cool things?
Thanks. Yeah. So I think it really started with my time over at Netflix, being exposed to machine learning and how do we conduct content recommendations for subscribers, and all the cool stuff we did there to personalize video. And then from there on to same thing at Roku, a content-centric company. And then from there to another startup where really focused on finance. I think that's where I started really applying finance away from video, AI away from video and more towards finance to solve problems that are really hard to solve just through statistics and just regular mathematics. And then that afterwards led me to kick off Tendi. So when I kicked off Tendi, the start of that, by the way, is that my daughter had asked me, how did she work a budget? And it dawned on me that more than half of our schools don't teach economics anymore in their senior year. That's something they used to do. And now it's been carved out of the program. So we have a whole generation of kids graduating high school and just going in and earning and spending money without a sense of how to do any sort of basic financial planning like budgeting or debt reduction or retirement planning. And so that's why I decided to apply my AI background towards personal finance.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. Although, John, you just bummed me out at the top of today's episode. As an economics and finance major, I didn't realize how much we've lost economics in the classroom at the high school level. That was one of my most impactful classes. And I love that that's part of your mission in what you've built with Tendi. But I really appreciate about your story how it goes back. I mean, largely today when we talk about AI, we talk about ChatGPT. They've brought so many of those large language model elements to the mainstream and to the public. But you talk about AI in so many deeper ways, because obviously you've been in it for much longer than the average person. What's AI mean to you? Obviously, you're running a company and you've built a company based on AI, but what's your vantage point on where we are today?
So it really comes down to the data and how do we use data to solve problems. Before we would use code and conditional code to solve problems like if this, do one thing, if that, do a different thing. And now what we do is we just apply a lot of data to a problem and look for patterns that we've seen before and then let that be the solution. So when you talk about LLMs, generally like OpenAI and Anthropic and the others, they're great general models. They know everything about everything. But where they kind of fall down is knowing very specific details about an individual. So they may not know enough about you personally. And it's more than just getting some facts and basic information. It's more about your complex financial structure because no two people have the same income, the same expenses, and the same debt. And so you need a model that's able to really tear all that apart, understand finance fundamentally, and then come up with a financial plan that's specific to an individual. And that's what we worked hard to construct Tendi to accomplish.
Yeah, I want to go deeper there because a lot of people don't probably fully appreciate the powers of LLMs, the limitations of LLMs, but also the possibilities of how you can train LLMs. John, I'll be honest, as the host of a podcast where I interview entrepreneurs for a living, I've seen my fair share of businesses that are essentially ChatGPT wrappers, and they're just building on OpenAI's API, of course. But with what you've done with Tendi, I teased it at the top of today's episode, is that Tendi is outscoring all other AI models when it comes to the certified financial planner exam. I want you to talk about that because obviously that speaks to how you've built this AI model, how you've fed it information and trained it. So that's very different from a mere UI wrapper. Talk to us about that.
It's a really great point because what happens is a lot of AI startups will in fact put a wrapper around the OpenAI API and call themselves an AI company. But the way I kind of look at it is unless you have your own proprietary AI model, then you're really not an AI company. And so the question is, how do you build that model? How do you get there? And it really starts with accumulating a lot of training data, lots and lots and lots, thousands and thousands of records of data. And so there's two ways to do that. Either one, you can go out and acquire it, you can license it or purchase it. And the other option is you can go out and generate it. And by generating it is you can use another AI model to generate 1,000 records that you then verify that they're all correct. And then that becomes your training set. With Tendi, what we did is we were able to get from our beta users a lot of bank transactions. So they signed on, they used the platform, and their budgets were manually crafted. And the budgets were structured statistically more than through AI recommendations. And through that exercise, the users were able to say, yes, this looks good. No, that looks bad. I'd like this adjusted. And that was the training element that showed whether the data was good or that the training data needed some improvement. And so once we had all that, we were able to feed it back into a base model and then train that base model to be a more specialized finance model. And it's that specialized finance model that was able to pass the CFP exam.
Yeah, that is so cool, honestly. Here's the one thing I want to call out about the only downfall that I see of podcasting as a medium, John, is the fact that it's not very visual. So I would love for listeners to see Tendi, but because we can't do that in a podcasting format, I'd love for you to paint the picture of what that looks like, because I've obviously seen your business and I so respect. I even gave you a compliment off the air about how beautiful it is. And it seems so responsive to the user's needs, which is ultimately the whole goal of AI, is for it to serve our needs, not vice versa. We don't want to be having the perfect prompts all the time. We want AI to work for us. And obviously your headline on your website says your AI-powered personal financial advisor. John, most people haven't had a AI-powered personal financial advisor. What's it look like in practicality?
And that's a great point, because really that's the problem we're trying to solve, is that those who can afford a personal financial advisor probably don't need one. It's the rest of us who do need that guidance and need someone to kind of help us with our finances and to understand it. But the user experience is, by the way, what you're seeing now in the current version is already out of date, and the new stuff that's coming is even cooler. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The current version helps, it enables anyone to connect their bank accounts. And then from there, we automatically pull all of their bank transactions. We do all the categorization, we do all the statistical work, and from there we actually create a budget, like an ideal spending plan for that individual. So once we have that ideal spending budget, and we also know what they do spend in reality, we create a series of challenges or competitions that help align how you do spend your money with how you should spend your money. So, for example, if you're overspending in food, we might recommend that there's a challenge that you eat at home for a week, or you bring your lunch to work with you for 1 week. And as you accomplish that, you can measure those gains and see that you are trending towards your ideal budget. It's all about shaping great behaviors. But here's the problem. Financial apps are really boring. There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of categories, and it's very, very much like reading a spreadsheet. And as beautiful as we've tried to make Tendi look, it's still just not hitting the mark that we really want. So we're taking on a whole new design, one that's completely graphical, completely visual, and representing things as relative shapes. And so these relative shapes let you drag objects around that represent different spending categories. And you can kind of tear them apart with your fingers to create those budgets. And it's more about playing with your numbers through touch and through objects that you interact with, and different colored shapes, and how you can see these shapes grow over time. It also gives you a much stronger representation of where you might be overspending or how your budget looks more holistically. And so that's the new version of the interface that we're working on. It's less numbers, more graphical, and more of like a fitness app or a visual graphics app. And that's going to be coming not just to iOS, which we're on now, but to also Android.
Yes, I love those little teases of what's coming down the pipeline. We're certainly going to talk about expansion and future plans in today's conversation, but one thing that I'll publicly confess to you, John, is that the first ever personal finance app that I used, like probably millions of other people, was of course Mint. Mint was really revolutionary at the time, but it didn't have any AI functionality. This was, probably a decade ago that I was using Mint. And so Mint relied on me, the end user, to put in my budget. And I did not follow that budget, John, because I was doing things in an ideal world, and I wasn't looking at, here's what I use the word should. You said, here's how much you should be spending on food, for example. I don't cook very often. I eat out most nights. So I would love an objective, and I think that that's what AI can bring, an objective view on what I should be spending on food, as opposed to me just saying, well, here's what I spent last month. That's my budget. Talk to us about that difference of user-driven versus some proactivity from something like AI that can actually make sense of it and give that individualized. That's what I think is so powerful about what you've built. Talk to us about that individualization of the advice and guidance.
Absolutely. And when it comes to any platform that is AI based, the real outcome is going to be that individual personalization. And so, we could create a bunch of rules, and we could create a bunch of guidelines for how you spend money and how you invest money. But really, it comes down to an individual. So having an AI platform that shapes its advice around an individual is essential. So I think what's also really important here is that it's important that AI, as it gets more mature and it can do more and it gets more infused in our life, that it doesn't sound too cold, because it could be too easy for the UI in the app to sound like it's being judgmental, like, naughty you for spending so much on food, or indulging and going for that extra latte. And it shouldn't ever be about shaming. It should always be about informing and letting you make the ideal decisions with the information you have. But it really comes down to personalization and studying your records, your transaction records. And one of the things that we're looking at is, how do we also factor in other details? For instance, if we knew more about your hobbies and your interests and what you like to do, we might be able to adjust the budgets in areas such as travel. If we knew from your Instagram posts that you love to go to the beach a lot, then maybe we bump up that travel budget automatically. And so the goal here is not to create a rigid budget that you feel constrained to, but to create a solid financial plan that you can live with. And a lot of people will be willing to sacrifice spending in other areas to spend more in areas they love. You mean, like, if I could spend half my budget on travel, that's okay. But as long as I have to like sell my car and take public transportation, or maybe cut back on my food expenses, that's a choice that many people would love to make. And so having a platform that's personalized enough to support that recommendation is what AI is all about.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing the way you talk about this, because I would imagine that 5 years from now, it's going inevitably to be a very different conversation. But for now, it seems like you and I are quite comfortable with giving data to AI, because we, obviously, as people who love technology, we understand the underlying usage of it, the protections. We obviously guide and guard ourselves as well in what we share. But a lot of people don't understand that. I think back to when Facebook started having personalized ads, my parents were thinking, they would always ask me like, Brian, is Facebook listening? Are they looking at my messages? Are they reading what I post? And my answer was, of course they are, because they want to give you more personalized ads so that your ads serve you. You don't want to be logging on and seeing ads about tennis. Neither of my parents are into tennis, so why would they want to see those ads? Talk to us about that side of the concerns that people might have, especially when it comes to even more sensitive data like banking information. John, I know that you've thought about all this stuff, so I very comfortably want to hear you navigate that with our listeners.
So yeah, we actually support different models within Tendi. Sort of that entry level approach is someone who just wants to manually enter their numbers, and it's a lot of work. If you want to enter all your transactions, be super secure, and nobody knows anything about your financial details other than what Tendi calculates, that's fine. You can manually enter that. The second tier is, you don't want to connect your bank account. You're not sure about this whole Tendi thing. You can certainly download bank statements as PDFs from your bank and just upload those statements. We will process them. We'll get the same data, do the same analytics. But you lose out on other things, like every day, am I trending in the right direction on my budget? Are there alerts? Like maybe there's some fraud happening on my account that I should know about real time. Instead of waiting for each month to upload the next statement, the top tier is that you can actually connect your online banking and get day-to-day notifications and transactions. Now, these aren't things that we've invented. I mean, a lot of companies, there's a handful of companies out there that are doing similar things and offering similar services. I think where we're unique is in a few different ways. One, of course, is that we really try to revolve the experience around the user, make it a lot less academic and a lot less number-centric and more engaging and fun. The challenges actually offer some guidance to how do you improve your finance. The other part is our tone and our messaging and our aesthetic. It's supposed to be friendly and supportive and encouraging and on your side, while still being serious and professional. And then I think the last differentiator is that we do have our own AI engine, and it's able to do more complex financial cases. We see in some of our competitors where they're only really able to tackle create a savings fund or debt reduction or plan for retirement. But when you want to combine some of these goals together into something a little more complicated, that's where our AI model really stands out.
Yeah.
And by the way, people get bank statements in the mail all the time, and they don't really secure that. So, a lot of folks have a false sense of security about their personal information. Maybe not willing to upload something, but they'll leave personal bank statements on the counter or by the front door or in their unsecured mailbox on the street. So a lot of folks need to really kind of be more aware of security all around.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even simple things that people falsely feel safe of connecting to airport Wi-Fi and not using a VPN. Like, we are so exposed in so many different ways. And I really appreciate that real view of security and the fact that you not only are thinking about it as a founder, but so clearly you're just thinking about it on a society level. And that really leads me into what I really want to hear from you about today, because I think it's so fascinating that on the surface, a lot of people would look at Tendi and say, that's really cool. You run a tech company. You have an AI company. But at the same time, we don't always see that intersection of a mission-driven company as well, which it's so clear to me, John, in everything I've read about your background, your mission, and how you've built Tendi, is that you intend not just to build a cool software tool, but you're bridging the financial literacy gap. You're combating wealth disparities. Talk to us about that mission-driven approach that's not so common in the tech world.
Okay, so this is where things get even more personal for me, because I really have a very clear view of where our national economy is headed and how it's expanding. The wealth gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We have a greater low income, the middle income band has shrunken, and it's actually all the signs are pointing to it getting worse. Some of my closest friends are professors of economics and CFOs, so these are the kinds of conversations we always have. So it's important to me to really look at how do we fix this for one really simple, selfish reason. We've seen historically, and I'm talking across the centuries, the more the wealth divide grows, the greater we see violent outbursts. A good example is like the French Revolution, where people were just so hungry and so poor and such a mass volume that it led to revolution. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to look for, that economic stability is really tied. Economic stability is really tied to our national security in so many ways. So taking on that challenge, it's like, great, noble. How do you know you're doing it? That's where it was important for us to come up with an actual metric. We had to measure our wealth gap. And we did it through a complex formula of income, population, demographics, everything that's on our website, as to how we can measure the nation's wealth gap and basically wealth distribution. And then we created a second metric, which is a personal health score, which measures your net worth. It measures your income, your debt, your expenses, everything into what is your own personal score. And it's like a fitness score. It's like a 0 to 100. Not a credit score. Credit scores are completely different. It's all about how much have you borrowed in the past and have you repaid and how fast you repaid. Our financial health index is more about where do you stand in terms of economic downturns. Are you going to weather it? Are you going to have problems? If you have an emergency or medical emergency and big bills, are you going to be able to cover them? And so with these two metrics, we're able to measure the impact Tendi has on our users. And then in years across the country on the in terms of economic disparity in the country. Now that one, we don't expect to see any reasonable shifts, at least due to our platform, for a number of years, but it's a way for us to help measure that change.
Yeah, I love hearing the way you talk about those things, John, because again, I'm going to bring up being an economics and finance major. It just sounds to me like an academic approach to solving this problem that you have, which is so interesting considering your background. I mean, we could look at your background at Netflix and Roku, for example, and then of course in technology with AI, but this academic research-backed approach that's making it even more accessible, it's just a really interesting intersection that you're operating within, and it makes this next question feel a bit silly and out of place, but we're on an entrepreneurial podcast, so I'm going to ask that question anyways. And it just seems to me like we talk in marketing terms about your unique selling proposition so frequently. And I think that all of these things speak to your organic, natural, unique differentiators. But when you consider that, what does that market penetration plan look like? Because talking to you today, I want everybody to start using this. And I would imagine you feel that urge 1,000 times more than I do. This is what you do for a living. What's that penetration plan look like? Because genuinely, this is something that benefits everybody.
No, it's a fantastic question. And what it comes down to is AI in general, we're seeing is enabling smaller teams to do more. So you talked about Mint, and they probably had a couple hundred employees, and they were charging $6 a month, and they probably had about 1 million customers. I don't know the exact numbers, but let's just assume that was the range. When you do the math, the operating costs to that business just didn't make sense. And they would have to keep raising their price tag to cover their costs. So being an AI company, and by this I mean operationally in terms of helping with our marketing, helping with a lot of our planning, scheduling, rollouts, deployment management, feature implementation. There's a lot that we're applying AI for that we don't need that extra marketer, press person, an extra QA person. We have 1 QA instead of 3 QA. There's things we can do to be more smaller and nimble. And then that allows us to charge a whole lot less. So where Mint was probably at $6 or $7, we're able to charge as low as $3. Now, there's a threshold for a lot of people. because a lot of folks don't care enough about their personal finance that they actually want to spend money to fix it. And that was Mint's downfall. It was just, I don't know if I want to spend $6 to $10 a month just to maybe save a little bit, like $15 a month or $20 a month, or to give me the bad news I didn't want to hear in the first place. But if you could work with a platform like Tendi for just $3 a month or so and get insights and advice that doesn't just help your finance get better, but actually educates you and to understand how you can have a better future and how you can plan for your future, then it becomes a more compelling and economically viable solution. We don't need to charge so much. We can charge a lot less.
Yeah, it's really cool, John, because hearing the way that you think about not just your today situation, but of course these future goals, I guess really what I want to ask you is a question entrepreneur to entrepreneur outside of the scope of what we've talked about. How do you make sense of where not only Tendi is going, but where the technology is going, where the industry is going? I even want to extrapolate and say where society is going, because it's clear to me that you view those longer term and bigger term ramifications. And so with that in mind, I would imagine that your mind, you're even more on the forefront of AI than most people in this country and in the world. And so you know better than the rest of us that 6 months from now, the technology is going to be so different. A year from now, the technology is going to be so different. So how do you balance and play that delicate game of here's where we are now and here's what we build for today's real life applications? You're already launched. You're already in the App Store. People are already using this thing versus saying, no, it's going to be revolutionary, not evolutionary. It's going to be revolutionary a year from now. How do you balance those things as a founder and executive?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really challenging because the technology is changing every day. And when we started, we didn't have agentic frameworks. We didn't have MCP. We didn't have A2A. A lot of these different AI technologies, DeepSeek R1 didn't exist. So there's so many of these, and chain of thought reasoning, which is really important, by the way, didn't exist as well, at least broadly in the AI community. So all these new technologies have emerged after we got started. But it's important for an AI startup to not wait for the next thing, test it, and try and integrate it. You've just got to build what you can immediately with what's available today.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm just simply saying you have to build with what's available today because it's going to be constantly changing, constantly improving, and it's really important to kind of establish your mark. And I want to go back again to the beginning where training your own model, and that is something that's going to be really proprietary. So what is your data moat? How do you use that data to build your own personal or proprietary model? And then how do you monetize that model through access?
Yeah, John, it's been so fun talking to you because you clearly have a love. I talked about all those different things that intersect into your unique differentiators, but hearing you talk about business moats and hearing you talk about the future, it shows that you're a true entrepreneur on the inside as well. The fact that you've had such a professional career, I'm so grateful that you're one of us and you are building an impactful and a mission-driven business on top of all of the other accomplishments that you have. It's really cool getting inside that part of your mind, and that's why I'm excited to hear the way that you answer this last question because it's super broad, so you can answer in any way that you want to, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, like I said, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Well, I think there are two things I really like to focus on. One is that you've got to move fast. This is a space that's growing quickly. It's evolving fast. The tools evolve fast. And if you have an idea or a solution or a way to fix a problem with data, you got to jump on it right away. The other thing is to really think about the world just in terms of numbers, because anything you can turn into a number. Anything, the temperature is a number, the weather is a number, everything's a number. The more you can turn things into the number, the more you can apply AI to predict it and to generate more of it or to work it into a solution. So really think about owning your proprietary AI model, building it fast, and make sure you plan it because training a model is very, very expensive. You got to plan out every possible detail before you write the first line of code and before you start training your model.
Yes, that is powerful advice, John. And it's advice that I know is very much from the front lines, as you are one of the forefront leaders, especially in your specific industry, what you've built with Tendi. I am wildly impressed with. I gave you these compliments off the air as well. So I'm not just saying it for the sake of listeners hearing me tooting your horn, but honestly, I'm so impressed with what you've built with Tendi. And I'm really excited for listeners, not just to hear you and I talk about it on today's podcast episode, but to go check it out. One point that you made that I don't want to gloss over, you made it earlier on our conversation, is the fact that not everybody has a personal financial advisor. I've never hired a personal one who's just focused on me. We have all these different ones at huge national agencies and even local ones that they're dealing with a zillion different clients and they're looking at all these different portfolios. We very rarely get that individualized attention. So I think it's so powerful what you've built. I'm excited for listeners to check it out. So drop those links on us, John. Where should listeners go from here?
Well, there's more information at the www.tendi.ai website. From there, there's links to the Apple Store download, and coming soon will be the links to the Google Play Store.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. You don't have to go hunting for that link. We are dropping it down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. It's super easy, though. John's company is Tendi, which is TENDI.ai. Again, if you're on the go, you don't have to memorize it. Just click through from the show notes. Otherwise, John, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate the opportunity.